Wow, look at these beautiful black faces. I'm so glad to have you all on. Listen, this is an incredible moment for me to be in a group with all of you. So thank you for having me. I'm indeed honored. I want to extend a warm welcome to our incredible HBCUs, community organizers, organizations, and partners joining us for an important conversation. We truly appreciate your presence today. So thank you for joining us in this. We're here to engage in a dynamic discussion of the emerging architects of Black narratives. And the reason I am honored to be in here is because perhaps you are including me in those emerging architects of Black narratives, shaping culture and creatives and community, a roundtable discussion. The conversation will explore how Black creatives are redefining and expanding representations of Black culture, history, and lived experiences. We will also examine the powerful intersection of artistic expression and social change. So, with all of that said, I'm excited to introduce the esteemed panelists joining us today. And there you see, there's Ramel Ross, an artist. He's waving right now. An artist, a filmmaker, a writer, and a liberated documentarian director of the film Nickel Boys. It is nominated for 2 Oscars for Best Picture and for Best Screenplay, and is based on the Pulitzer Prize winning novel by Colson Whitehead, which is inspired by the harrowing story of the notoriously abusive Dozier School in northern Florida. It's a fantastic film. I, quite frankly, thought it should be nominated for cinematography, but we'll get to that later as well. So we'll get to that later. Ramel and the film are getting a huge amount of awards buzz. The New York Times did a big feature story on Ramel last month, and the film was named #1 movie of the year by The New Yorker, The New York Times, and The Atlantic. Welcome, Ramel. Good to have you here.
Yeah, what a pleasure. Yeah, sorry.
W. Kamau Bell is someone that I've known for a long time. We're former colleagues at CNN and we're old friends. He's an Emmy and Peabody Award-winning TV host. He's a filmmaker. He's a comedian, husband, and dad. He is currently hitting the road on his new comedy tour called Who's With Me? Tour schedule and tickets are available at www.kamaubell.com, www.wkamaubell.com. That's WKAMAU bell.com. Oh, Kamau is also featured in the current season of Celebrity Jeopardy. Uh-oh. And has advanced to the semifinals. Well, you got anything to tell us, Kamal?
I know it pains you to say my accolades, Don, but yes, thank you. But yes, I'm just out here trying to put food on my kids' table and hopefully help the person behind me a little bit to get through the door that I got through.
All right, great. All right. We appreciate you. You know I love you. So
No, I know.
don't start none, won't be none. Pizza Butler, a formally trained and awarded visual artist with work in museums across the country, including the Smithsonian National Museum of African American History and Culture, the Perez Museum of Miami, and the Los Angeles County Museum of Art. Throughout the course of her career, she has received an honorary Doctor of Letters from Bloomfield College and the Gordon Parks Foundation Fellowship Award. High honors and high praise to you. Welcome, Bisa.
Hey Don, happy to be here. I think this is going to be an amazing conversation. I've been looking forward to it.
Oh, that's great. Khalil Green, probably the most wise among us and the youngest. Also known as a Gen Z historian, made history when he was elected as Yale University's first Black student body president just 1 week after his 19th birthday. Now an educator, an edutainer, I should say, educational entertainer. Green has amassed over 750,000 followers and garnered more than 30 million views across TikTok, Instagram, and LinkedIn. His primary focus on social media is to share history lessons that provide crucial context for the challenges of young people that they face in today's society. He is a 2-time Emmy nominated host of Nickelodeon's revival of Nick News. His work as an educational activist has been recognized by the New York Times and Forbes magazine. Welcome to you, Khalil. How you doing?
I'm doing good. It's good to see you guys again, specifically Don and Kamau. One of the reasons I'm Emmy nominated is Kamau. His documentary beat us at the Emmys, and he's just one of the people who's been an inspiration for me. So it's always great to see you.
Yeah, don't not too much. He'll get the big head. So, welcome to all of you. I'm so glad. Look, those are quite the introductions. And by the way, happy Black History Month to all of you. So I think it's apropos that we're doing this. Ramel, let me just say that one of the reasons that inspired me to do this, and even to agree to do this, is because when I saw Nickel Boys, I was so moved by the film and the way that you tell Black history, and I really believe Black future through the telling of Black history through, as you say, I think you have called it, you say, you talk about linguistic language and then the language of cinema. And talk to us about that, because again, as I say, you tell the history and the future through this new sort of way.
Yeah, I also must say, Don, someone needs to do an intro for you too. I mean, we know you well, but also like you are, I mean, not only are, kind of idol and representative of like, what representation is possible in the news, but like my dad I have to say my dad loves you, like loves you. He talks about you more than me, and I'm like, Dad, this is strange. Like I know Don's not on. See, it's just anyway, we'll go to Nickel Boys.
Well, thank you,
Pleasure
Dad.
to be here with you all.
Yeah, yeah. So I want to talk about that. I mean, again, as I think you said you tell, is it consciousness through camera? That's really what I'm referring to when I talk about the way that you're doing this.
Yeah, thanks for clarifying. It's thinking about the camera as an extension of consciousness, or trying to make the camera an extension of consciousness. A central question to the film and sort of my art practice has been like, how do you make the camera an organ? Like, how do you bring it into the body and get closer to subjectivity? Black subjectivity in cinema and in photography is really hard to come by. We have like, really brilliant artists over time, from like Marlon Riggs to Spike Lee now, Julie Dash, of course, that have been making amazing work. But that's that specificity we have of jazz. Like we know jazz is us. Like we know jazz is ours. Like we know Toni Morrison's writing, right? Like there's something there, given the length of time that those mediums have been around, that is distinctly black. The way that the camera like objectifies black folks, and the way that it has always been in contrast to who we actually are, with the way in which it reduces, it's fundamentally like white gaze oriented device. Like these things, I think, are coming to a head with the language being in the hands of new makers and younger folks that are thinking a little bit more critically about the lens.
Yeah. Let's talk about that since you mentioned the young folks. Khalil, as you are doing, you are telling the history of Black folks, really, when you do your thing and when you do it on social media. What you're doing is truly the new way that people are getting information and
Hmm.
news. Do you understand the effect of that? Because some people would look at, what I did at CNN as, oh, wow, well, that is the end all be all. That's all different now. People like you can have just as much influence, if not more, than someone on a CNN and MSNBC and ABC News and on and on and on. Why do you think that is happening? And do you think that will continue to happen? And do you understand the influence that you have and can potentially have?
Yeah, I mean, I think I understand the influence. I find the challenge is trying to get a lot of other people to understand the influence. I've been doing this for about 4 years, and I really think the first time that a large, probably majority of the country really understood the power of influencers is after this previous election, and seeing how like both administrations, both candidates were trying to use influencers as much as possible, and that influencers really ran the election. I think the reason this is the case is because just so many people are on social media. The way the algorithms work, they are made to be very addicting. Like they have kids addicted to the algorithm. They have older people like my grandparents who are like always on TikTok. And I think that the form of media is just so consumable, that it is really a place where anyone can find something that is for them. So I try to merge history, black history, important topics with trending topics, with scandals that are happening, with like whatever is on the headlines, so that people are able to actually get educational content as opposed to what we call brain rot content, which is just content that you can watch without really learning anything from.
Listen, I wonder, a follow up on that, because, we're in this whole time where they're talking about DEI and meritocracy. And I was like, when was, America ever really a meritocracy? Because if it really was, and many of the people who are in office now would not even be there. So, but what I want to ask you is, do you think that you mentioned the algorithm? Do you think that this is an opportunity to sort of level the playing field when it comes to having a voice and teach and telling the history and the present and the future of African Americans, or do you think that the algorithm, as the news was and has always been, is there a bias in that?
Yeah, and I think there really was an opportunity for these social media platforms to be that space where like these stories that were covered up, unheard of, that were suppressed even can reach the masses, and it does work that way very often. I mean, I'm only here because, especially after 2020, there was a pathway for Black creators to tell these stories. I think what we're seeing now, as it goes with the news cycle, that these platforms are suppressing more and more and more things that they call political. So I know like one company, I can just say it, or I'm probably not going to say it, but one company specifically made it that you have to opt into even seeing political content on your feed. Otherwise, like it's passively just suppressed. So many creators who are talking about these topics get banned, get their accounts removed, and just don't have support. So there was an opportunity for it to be that, but over time it's decreasing its usage as a place for advocacy because of these weird restrictions.
Kamal, where do you see comedy in all of this, in the telling of our history? Is there a is this isn't a new thing for comedians to be? I look back on Red Fox and Mom's Mabley and all those folks who were the pioneers of really telling our history. And actually, I think they did a good job of telling our present. I mean, you look at Richard Pryor in the 1970s, really just telling what Black people, what our lives are like. So where does comedy fit in all of this? Is there a new vehicle for comedy in all of this?
I mean, comedy is actually having another comedy boom, like an economic boom, and most of that is because of social media. Most of that is because of comedians understanding that, like, it used to be. I was talking to a friend of mine today, who's a comedian, like of my generation, that we used to be afraid to share our bits until it was time for the special, and now a comedian like Josh Johnson is like giving it away every week, giving hours of it away every year, like hundreds of hours of material away, because he understands it's more important that you see me in your face regularly than it is that I save it up for some Netflix special that may never come. So I
Hmm.
think the idea being that comedians are starting to understand that, like, we want to be in daily conversation with you, and especially Black comedians understand, like Josh Johnson, Roy Wood, that, like, the more I'm in daily conversation with the headlines, the more you will come to me for a source of your, not only your humor but some of your information too. So, and and comedy as a communication device is throughout all of these different things that we're talking about. Everybody is using comedy at some point. I mean, the reason why I sort of discovered Kilo Green is because, yeah, he's smart, but he's also like knows how to make it entertaining and funny. And I was like, either I got to be jealous of this guy or I got to share his information and reach out and become friends. So I decided to take the latter route. Uh, so I can get a job later.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think the idea being that, like, Black folks have always used comedy to tell our stories in this country. We have always used humor as a way to train, because otherwise, what would we be left with in this country if we didn't use the humor and the arts to help translate the pain?
What I love about you, and I think that you were one of the pioneers in this, and that is social commentary, which you did through your show. And I wonder, and some white comedians like Jon Stewart and others, they have not been afraid to be social commentators. And I see, now Dave Chappelle is doing it. Was there something? Do you think that Black comedians were sort of limited in being able to do that, or am I getting that wrong?
No, we're all standing on the shoulders of Dick Gregory. Dick Gregory gave up his whole career basically because he was like, "Oh, I don't want to be a comedian who does activism. I want to be a funny activist,"
Mm.
basically, at some point.
Mhm.
So I think we're all standing on the shoulders of Dick Gregory. Certainly, Richard Pryor did it. I think the difference is that it used to be that if you were the so-called smarty art Negro, you didn't have an audience. It was harder to find an audience. But
Right.
now you can actually be this smart Black comedian and find an audience. It used to be that we wouldn't, because if you think back when I was coming up, Def Jam was all the Black comedy. And it's not saying we're smart comics on Def Jam, but you weren't going to turn on Def Jam to find somebody talking about the issues. Certainly, they talked about the subject of the day and had political takes, but you weren't going to find a young Dick Gregory on Def Jam at that point. But now, like I said, Josh Johnson is another one. Either I got to be friends with him or I got to hate him. So I'm going to be friends with him. But, like, it's just like, I'm going to be every day showing that Black is a monolith and Black are not all the same. And I'm just going to do what I want to do and not feel the pressure from even my community to make it more digestible or more Black. And I'm putting scare quotes there.
Yeah. Bisa, I saved you for last for this first part because we're the three of us are sort of in the visual, like broadcast, so to speak, movie, that kind of thing, and you are an art, paintings, that kind of thing. And I wonder how now that this sort of, I don't know if it's a renaissance or this emergence of and more interest in Black artists now with the Kende Wiley, and then you've got Rasheed Johnson, um, and Cheryl, what's her name? The who did Obama,
Amy
Amy Sherrill,
Sherrill.
Amy Sherrill.
Hmm.
And so, what is this new? I don't know if I want to call it renaissance, but this new emergence of Black artists. What is it doing for Black folks and the telling of our history?
I feel like, well, one thing that we all have in common, what I hear about everybody saying, is we're looking for the truth. We're looking for authenticity. We, as people of color, the Black diaspora, we're looking to see ourselves in the way that we interact on a daily basis. And I think when social media was bursting, TikTok was born, Instagram, they became more interactive, more political. I think artists were, well, Instagram first was a visual medium, show pictures. So when artists started putting their works up there, it meant we weren't reliant on a gallery that may not be owned by somebody who has any interest in our culture or any interest in representing us properly. We could have put our work out there, in a way, art for the people. Everybody could consume that on social media without paying for anything. They don't have to walk in a museum and have a guard follow them around or ask them. I think what happened in one of the museums, they asked the school children if they wanted watermelon, like crazy incidents like that. When we have these micro and macro aggressions, now artists could put out the work that they wanted to without being judged by saying, like, this is too Black. And then people were hungry for it. So I think it's a cause and effect. And the more people tune in to Kamal or Ramel or Yudon or Khalil, they're also drawn to Black culture. And we are all in this microcosm together.
Yeah. Why is it? Maybe it's just that, maybe it's just me, but I feel like, whatever we do, our craft, our art, or whatever it is, that um, be said that we take it more seriously. It's more personal, and perhaps because a lot of it is because our ancestors didn't, in some way, get to exhibit the full extent of their creativity and even their humanity. And so we feel like we are sort of making up for that in our profession and in our art. Am I wrong with that?
You're absolutely right. My husband is a hip hop DJ, and he always says, like, and I know you'll come out. I know you've heard, like, we're doing this for the Cold Crush, for what happened to the Cold Crush brothers, that they never were paid the way they were supposed to. I saw that Roxanne Shante finally got like a huge award recently, and she's been huge in the community. But for us, like me, a former student of Howard University, even my own professors who were giants on campus and giants in the Black art world, like Jeff Donaldson, Elizabeth Catlett, those people are just now getting their due. So it wasn't like even our ancestors so much. It was like my professors in the classroom who were gigantic were not gigantic in their finances the way they should have been in a national worldwide appeal.
Yeah. Well, when I watch things like the Nickel Boys and either any of your work, I was watching the movie and I kept thinking to myself, like, well, this is why I do it. For all of these,
Mm,
young men who are like me, who never even got the opportunity. I can't
mm-hmm.
even think of going to, what do they call it? The hot box, um,
Sweatbox,
the
yeah.
sweat box, or, being beaten or whipped like that. And some of them even dying. But I
Mm-hmm.
think too often we forget about that. But I think it's important, especially for us, to be reminded of it, not just the larger culture, but for us to be reminded of it, so that so that we can even have more of a cohesion and more of a community among ourselves, so that we can use ourselves as inspiration and our ancestors as well.
Yeah, there's something about um I think maybe Black culture, like, always feeling like the underdog. It's like kind of always in the shadow of, the white gaze or white culture, that I think maybe produces a bit of that urgency that you were asking Bisa about, or that differentness, or that um just that element of like there's just something more always when we're doing something, right? Like very rarely are we doing something for the sake of it. Like it always has some sort of like I don't know, some psychic energy. And it is often in looking at those who are similar to us who haven't been like I'm middle class, and I look at those who haven't had a middle class background like I have from, whatever part of Alabama or whatever. And there's just something that's unfair about the way in which their opportunities are offered in relative to others. And the case is extreme when we're talking about the Dozier School boys, in which, people are sent to a reform school for incorrigibility, which is like something I have to look up. I'm like, what does that mean?
You're
It's like, oh, for
incorrigible.
being annoying or and yeah incorrigible, and then you go to a reform school when you end up dead. It's like not something that most people in our country have to deal with or understand. So there's yeah, we have like a chip on our shoulder. Yeah, that it's like infuriating to even talk about it. you
Yeah.
know
And no due process, right?
yeah,
Which is supposed
yeah.
to be, what the Constitution allows for all. But we all know the Constitution was not written for us, Kamal. Am I correct? That's what people don't realize in this day and age, Kamal, is that the Constitution was
Yeah.
never written for us. And so for those who say, we want a meritocracy right now,
Mhm.
for people and the DEI and what have you, um, what are they not getting? How
So
much time do we have?
yeah. So the news story recently that brought it home, I just read, was there's a all girls school in South Carolina, like an elite all girls school in South Carolina. So elite all girls school means most way whiter than like 78% white or something. And they have a day every year where they have these girls, and like Barbara Bush went to this school. That's how elite this school is. And they had a day where they have these girls meet engineers from the federal government to learn about being engineers. Like girls can learn how to do STEM and science. And that program was just canceled because it's under DEI.
Hmm.
So what we understand once again is that the biggest beneficiaries, as we all know and hear, of affirmative action are white women, and those white women, many of whom voted for Trump, and now their daughters. I'm sure some of those white girls at this elite school, their moms voted for Trump, can't meet engineers. So the idea being that like if you design something to hurt black people, you're ultimately going to hurt you're going to hurt more than just black people. And often we're the canary in the coal mine where if we say it's black people, we can actually hurt a lot more people than just black people. Because if they said this is to hurt women, it wouldn't get white women, it wouldn't get the same push. And then the other thing is like, and by the same token, if we can lift us up, it always lifts up other people too, which is like the affirmative action thing. It always lifts. It's always gonna. It's always. If we rise, America rises automatically.
But what do you do this through? How do you combat this through your work now? Are you
To
reaching those
combat.
people who need to hear that?
Well, yeah. So first of all, I think I have like I started a Substack, which I think a lot of people are doing right now because you're like, I just want to talk to my audience. I don't want to fight with trolls all day on social media. So I'm going to find my audience, and then literally Khalil Green is one of the people where I'm like, he's bigger than me on social media, but my audience doesn't know Khalil. So I'm like, I got to make sure that my audience gets. And also, he's doing things that I can't do, or wouldn't even think to do, or would think to do, but wouldn't do them the way he's doing it. So I'm also trying to put people like Khalil. There's Mr. Krim, your favorite Black History teacher. There's Kimberly Renee. There's Francesca Ramsey. I feel like it is my job to put all these other, especially lots of creators, but especially Black creators, in front of my audience to go. It's not just me.
Hmm.
So it's like my job is to not only get through the door, but all of our job is to keep the door open for the people behind us, or the people who just haven't come through this door. And Khalil can speak to this, but certainly a lot of these creators aren't even thinking about getting on television. They're not even thinking about like whatever we old folks define mainstream success as.
Yeah.
They're just trying to like they're sitting in their kitchen doing the best they can, often making a better living than some of us at just doing what they do. Now they're hustling and working hard, but my job is to go. Maybe I can help you get through to mainstream access. Maybe you don't want that, but those checks come with insurance often. So like my job is to sort of make sure that those people, if they want that access, can get that access.
It's kind of amazing because I very rarely think of, after being in corporate media for so long, I very rarely turn on the TV to watch it. I'm in a different thing now. I do a lot of watching a lot of digital media, YouTube, TikTok, and all of that. And people are like, oh, wait a minute, you're over here, and all of a sudden you have 1 million TikTok followers. I'm like, do you know that's quite a feat? I don't care if I was a cable news, star for 20 years. It doesn't matter. That's a whole different thing. So, Khalil, how do you approach this? Because look, I come from the school of, no matter how young you are, you can't, that wisdom only comes through age, right? And so some of the things that you may not have been taught. I just want to know how you approach this as a young person, trying to educate people about our people.
I'm I mean I still do believe that wisdom does come with age, and I think some of the ways that you can like fast track getting that wisdom is by having mentors and by working with people older than you. So for example, with Kamal's point, so many creators, I'm one of the lucky ones that has the ability to do this in a financially sustainable way, but so many creators don't have that. They just make videos online. They love the clicks, they love the following that they're getting, but they have a whole complete day job, not realizing that they could monetize like exponentially more than what they're getting from their work. So oftentimes you have to lean on older people, lean on people to tell you, okay, yeah, you have this TikTok, but start a Substack. Kamal, thank you for all the subscribers that you've gotten me so far, but like that's important because if I didn't have that, I would not own my audience. No matter what awards I have, like I still was mainly on social media without owning my audience until I made that decision after seeing people like you start a Substack. So that's where I try to find wisdom. I do think the expertise that I have as a young person comes from how I can talk to young people. So I do have the specific understanding of like the trends and the language and the memes that people resonate with. And I use that as a form of communication. So while I am able to amplify my message and get it out there because I am a young person who's speaking this language, I think creating sustainable business, understanding like the gamut of how to do this in a long-term way, in a sustainable way, that often comes from me looking towards older people, older folks, older audiences, and you, Don, as well. Thanks for helping me out in
Yeah.
all the ways you've done it as well.
Yeah, I know. And we're meeting to try to, Khalil and I are meeting to try to get him
No, I'm meeting with
do
Khalil.
something
No,
on
no, no, no,
that.
no,
We
no.
can all, we can all share him. We can
No,
all.
Peace.
I'm meeting with him now. Now I am too.
Okay.
Unity, black unity,
Can I say
please.
one thing about the age thing? As the AARP member of the panel, that
I think I'm
we have
older
to
than you.
remember.
Don't even try it.
You are, but in Hollywood terms, you're younger than me, though. You look better than I do. So anyway, all I'm saying this is that we have to remember that that we think of age now in a way that we haven't always thought of
Yeah.
age, and also like because we're living longer. The average age of the Black Panthers was 19 years old.
Wow.
We look at those pictures of Black Panther members, and they look like they're in their 40s because they were carrying the weight of the world. But that was literally at this point, Khalil would be an OG in the Black Panthers in the 60s because like the leaders of the Black Panthers were people in their teens and early 20s, and we don't think of them that way, but that's the truth, and they changed the world literally.
Well, when you were thinking about Dr. King, what were they in their 30s when they were doing that, or they
Yeah,
were young?
MLK died at 39. Like,
Crazy.
like now a
Yeah.
39-year-old is like playing video games for a living. You know what I mean? Like, it's like we have to understand that, like, he hadn't had his midlife crisis yet.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But also wisdom comes with experience as much as age. Like there's two sides to it.
Yeah.
And Khalil, you have experience in a place that I have no experience in. And so I can be 90 years old with all the wisdom in the world, but if it's not in your specific mode of interacting with folks and having these conversations and meme culture and the burgeoning nature of the technology of the internet, it's like irrelevant, you know?
Right. Right. Hey, Khalil, let me ask you, what about monetizing? Do you find it harder? Or again, I want to know if it's everything is equal. Are advertisers open to you as they are to folks in the larger culture? Because we see folks, some folks are getting $125 million contracts, or they've become Joe Rogans. And I haven't really seen that except for a Shannon Sharp, which is not even close to a Joe Rogan or a Alex Cooper.
Yeah. Once again, I would say I'm definitely one of the lucky ones, but I remember there was an article that came out maybe around 2021, 2022, and it said that of any industry, whether it be the tech field or entertainment or whatever the case it is, the influencer industry had the largest racial pay gap of any job, any industry, any career that you could imagine. And it's largely because there's no standardized rates. So you can have someone who gets like $500,000 for one post on TikTok just from the savviness of their agent, and someone else who like just absolutely once again gets nothing, gets $100, even though they have the same following. And obviously, it's often correlated with race because managers and agents and brands, they are much more comfortable with white creators by and large. White creators often don't have the expectation they get political in their work. Whereas, like, as a black creator, like, you can, of course, like, you could be a beauty influencer, but when George Floyd was murdered, like, you're gonna talk about it because it affects you, because politics has an effect on everything you do. So,
Right.
like, your skin color inherently makes you not brand safe. So that lowers your brand value. So the disparity is huge, and it's really terrible.
That is wisdom that I didn't have until I got into this business because, there are these little blonde women who talk politics all the time and they say the most awful things about the former and current president of the United States. And you watch their show, they have every brand, every sponsor. And then one of my salespeople will reach out and, oh, we don't like to do politics. It's just not brand safe. It's too controversial. And I was like, have you seen what these two little blonde ladies are doing? They're worse than I am. What is that, Ramel?
I personally believe that, I think black skin is content. I think that the politics are in the skin. Like, by fact of her being a blonde woman, like she is just more accessible and what she's taken can be taken less seriously or less aggressively. Like it's just fundamentally like I try to think about it's very abstract, but like what is America's visual constitution? Right? Like what is the rights as it's based on the codification of like color and skin. And like those things are so ephemeral and difficult to talk about, but they're built into everything that Khalil's saying about whether or not a brand's willing to give someone a platform. Like it's like it's built in.
How is this new? How is this affecting you, especially and black filmmakers? Because now, like I think the only movies really that get greenlit easily, and I'm not in Hollywood, so I'm not for sure, seem to be like big, blockbusters, like Marvel type movies. And now we're sort of in a space now where you can release a movie, you can do it on Netflix, it can be a limited series, it doesn't have to go through a giant box office. So how has this new era affected black movie creators, so to speak, in this industry?
I mean, I'm also like in the art world, and I'm excited to hear Bisa take this question as well. I think from what I've experienced, and I'll go straight to like an Anjanou Ellis Taylor who is Hattie in Nickel Boys, right? Like we're talking about a generational performance, like
Amazing.
phenomenal acting, and we're talking about her taking on a technical acting practice that was kind of relatively unseen in cinema before, maybe in small bits. Anjanou doesn't get roles like this. Like Anjanou doesn't have the offers that Julian Moore has, that Nicole Kidman has. To be a black filmmaker is to be expected to make films about black struggle. To make films about black progress, to make films with all black actors. And I think that these things are good expectations, or they're kind of built into being a person of color. But it's so complicated because it's a numbers game, that we don't have access to the numbers, nor do we have access to the power. Those who are in positions to make these decisions about what to make or what not to make are really worried about self-preservation, rightfully so. Like, what are they going to take a risk and like lose their potential to do something that they think is interesting, for a metric that doesn't match their bosses? Like, it's so complicated, you know?
We need more black people like running these industries who get us.
I know.
Be,
We have like Alana Mayo at Orion, and there are many more, but she is the one that like ultimately greenlit this film, right? And this film is crazy. As you see it on screen, that's how the script is written. No other producing team aside from Plan B and Orion and Louverture and anonymous content would make this film. Like it takes an Alana to give the money to it, you
hmm
know?
Bisa, I want to bring you in, because Ramel is right. Like, how is this affecting you? Same question to you, and can you respond to what he said?
Well, I was thinking about how we are expected to do things differently than other people, like you talked about, Don. Ramel, also in terms of what we put out here during the war, I don't know, but the Palestinian-Israeli conflict is still ongoing. But I know that me and other artists got threatening letters from different media outlets saying like, we need you to be non-political. We need you to not speak on this. And it's interesting how much power there is in the visual arts and in what we hear and what we see. If you see that, like the current president now appointed himself, right, the director of the Kennedy Center, it's he understands very much how much power there is in the visual and how that suppression starts with just a creative, just a black face being present and saying, this is my art and this is about my people.
I want to ask you though, how does that affect then Black artists? Because, I buy mainly Black art, and I buy my Black art, members of the LGBTQ community. Like I do Marcus Brutus, right? I do um, what's her name, Lauren Halsey, or Geneva Ellis, right? Or Rashid, Omar Rashid, right? So I do, or Popel, William Popel. So what is that? I want to know what that means for the art world, for Black art, now that you have someone appointing himself the head of the Kennedy Center, which is very prestigious and can move the art world.
Can move, suppress. That's art is propaganda. What is the message that you're sending? And another thing that my professors were all born out of this 1960s movement, the Black Arts movement. So they're very much like, their professors were like W.E.B. Du Bois. So you have a purpose. You must uplift the race. The talented to go back and disseminate these positive messages.
Right.
And it is suppression that is happening, because I've heard from even Black gallery owners telling their artists, tone it down, or I've had to remove this piece off the wall. You are messing up my display and you're messing up my money. So your art needs to be less political, less in your face. Don't mention the war. Don't mention, Muslims. Don't mention all of the DEI catchwords that we all know are not really the grand beneficiaries of DEI. But what the camera wants to say is, thank God I have surrounded myself with a team who I know historically, not just Black people, Black and white people, who historically stood by Black people in the low times, like in the 1980s when Black art was being very much suppressed. So I'm trying to move forward and keeping my team very tight and very strong. And I think that we are all going to have to, you can't just go out here to any gallery and it's not, all your kinfolk. What is it? All your skinfolk are not your kinfolk.
Not kinfolk,
Look for
yeah.
people who are understanding you politically.
Yeah. So Kamal, as you call yourself the senior one in the group, and I do mean that with respect. I'm not giving you shade. So offer us some advice. And what do we do when you hear what Biza is saying, the suppression and the suppression and possible suppression of Black art in this sort of anti-DEI time, when she's basically saying, "Don't cast your pearl before swine." So then, what do we do?
Well, it's funny you bring up the Kennedy Center because I had the honor to perform at the Kennedy Center last night on the first stop of my stand-up comedy tour, and it was booked. I think it was still booked so long ago that Biden was running for president. But you know, and as I was on the plane flying out to DC, where I am right now, was when it all blew up that Trump was taking over. And there becomes this question of like, you see Shonda Rhimes step down, you see Issa Rae cancel the show, and I respect those two women, possibly two of the most respected women in Hollywood, as far as for me personally. And it was like, what do I do? And people are like, are you going to cancel? And I was like, and I sort of was like, no, I'm not going to cancel. I'm going to go there and do what I do as black as possible. I'm going to, I know that there's nights where there's time you get power from stepping away, and there's time when you get power from showing up and doing it your black ass, being your black ass self. And so I was like, that's what I'm going to do. And me and my friend Dwayne Kennedy, who's another black comedian, opened up, and he said, welcome to the Kennedy Center. For the last night, you're going to see two black men on this stage in a long time. And so the crowd is like, they spoke truth to the thing that we're all feeling, and they're not afraid of it. And so for me, I think what you do is we all have to make choices. Right now, there's a lot of talk about boycotts, and Target has been one of the focuses of that. As far as like what Target has dismantled their DEI programs, and then there's all these black business owners who are like, "But we have products in Target," and that becomes a complicated conversation that deserves to be had. And I think the thing that we have to do is understand that we're not all going to come to the same conclusion, but we have to sort of trust. If I believe you're on the right side of history, even if you're going to make a different decision than me, we're still on the right side of history. So I think we have to let people make their own decisions and understand. But if we're going to do something as big as like a boycott, we have to understand that that doesn't start on Instagram. It starts in community centers, in the basements of churches, in black spaces, and it becomes an organized thing. The Montgomery bus boycott wasn't a thing they just sort of talked about. Those, I think, if we're talking about those types of big culture, like activist movements, that and the activists are out there to help us do it, but we have to do it in the way that we were taught by our
I,
previous
I would disagree
generations.
with you on one point, and I agree. I agree with the everything that you said, the whole of your. But it can start on Instagram. It can start on social media, but then you have to organize after that.
Yeah, I'm just saying, like, it doesn't. I think when I say it doesn't start on Instagram, I mean it's not just on Instagram.
Yeah.
I guess is what I'm saying. It's like, yeah, like it's not. I believe in the power of social media to help connect us, but I think we all know a lot of our white allies who turned their Instagram squares to black in 2020 as some sort of solidarity with something, and I was like, I don't even know what this is. And I reached out to like all my black activists, like, I don't know what this is either, because those white allies thought turning their Instagram squares to black was doing something. And so I just want to be clear that like if it's only happening there, you're not actually doing something.
Well, I thought about when you were saying that, when you said showing up as black as possible, because that's my thing. Because you remember at sometimes we'd have to say like black, we'd have to like whisper it. When we were when I was in corporate media, and you're like, okay, can't be too black now.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
no.
always
Yeah.
let it flip. I
I
know
Hey,
would,
it,
I
I've
would
got a
like to
question for you.
you can only
yeah.
try to pass for so long.
John, I've got a question for you guys.
Yeah.
I wonder, like, how, and maybe it's a bad question and we shouldn't be thinking on these terms, but like, I wonder how to increase our audiences kind of like across the line, you know? And maybe that's like too bipartisan of a way of thinking, but like, you make a film like Nickel Boys and the log line just like pushes away people who need to see the film and actually who want to see the film, you know? But there's something about the language that we use to talk about blackness, that we talk about to talk about our stories or whatever, that is like just coded in a way where people are like, no, too hard, or I don't want to see a black film. Because you know, when we see log lines for films that aren't black films, they don't say white films. I
Right.
think if they said that, then maybe you know the white people would think twice about even watching those, and the way in which they're implicated in you know in bolstering the centrality of white experience. But it's such a challenging, equally challenging to the complications of institutions. Yeah. Oh, Khalil, please,
Right.
please.
Good.
I'm
Hey,
like,
Khalil.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I mean, I think when something goes viral within the black community, whether it's marketed as something specifically black or not, I think other people inherently just want to emulate it. I think one example is like the Black Panther movies. Like those were marketed as like Marvel's like blackest movies, with Ryan Coogler at the helm, and like the black people really really supported it, and it became like he became one of the most popular characters across the board. There's obviously like other examples, whether it be AAVE or any dance trend that happens on TikTok. Those are the ones that are most accessible to me. But I think that a lot of times, like the way that we get it to be marketed or like people outside the culture to see it is to like uplift our own culture. Every single black pop star, whether it's Beyonce or I'm trying to think of like other ones off the top of my head, but like whoever it is, whoever's mainstream, they got there because they had a strong black, very black base, very black start at the foundation. So I don't think it needs to be like explicitly marketed outside of the community. I think just by like supporting ourselves, it's almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy, and that everyone will just want to like look, oh, like what are those people up to? Like what is this thing that everyone's like into? Because black people make things cool, and they'll just want to follow along right after.
So I think that black culture is American culture. But I do think that it can be, look, I think people do want to emulate us. Because you guys know, I think among the four of us, we've been all over the world. And, you know, when you are, you know, in Australia or in Asia and you hear, you know, Beyonce, or you know, people are wearing Jordans, you know what I'm saying? You're like, oh, okay, I see what's happening. And a lot of us don't even own our own brilliance, right, and genius, because we give it away. But I do think that it can be marketed in a way not to make it niche or ghettoize it. You know, I think about when I know this sounds weird, okay, Ramel, but go with me. When I was watching your film and the friendship between the two young men, I kept thinking of, like, Brokeback Mountain, right? Which was a story about gay men or who were closeted, whatever. But that movie was sold as it was a big movie with two big stars, and then there
Hmm.
was the gay theme to it. And so I think
Hmm.
that
Hmm.
black movies can be sold as black movies with black stars or whatever it is, and not to be. I think that's incumbent upon Hollywood to do it, and the people who
Yeah.
own the Warner Brothers of the world to understand, the importance of, quite frankly, diversity. And
Yeah.
I don't know, that takes, like you said, come on, that takes a Shonda Rhimes, or who else that you said resigned from the
Issa Rae,
Issa
Issa Rae,
Rae.
she canceled her
It
show.
takes those to folks like
Well,
that to make
Insecure is a
money.
great example of that. Insecure was a show that was like black people read that show way differently than white people read that show, but it was a hit show for everybody,
Yeah.
And I think that, like, and I also think, just to weigh in a little bit on that, I think titles of things is super important, and how things are marketed is it's like you can make a super black thing, but if you title it in such a way that white people don't understand that it is, that, like, they sort of walk through the door like, oh, this is super black. And I think that, like, Ryan Coogler used Marvel as a Trojan horse to blackness.
Yeah.
Because Black Panther was not invented by black comic book creators. It was invented, like most comic book characters, by white Jewish guys. And so, but he turned it into something that felt very black, but it was a Trojan horse. And I
It,
think, the original title for United States of America was Black Man, White America. And I
yeah.
was like, because that's not a show that doesn't even invite me to it.
The
So
beginning of your answer sounded a lot like the Super Bowl halftime. I mean, that was a Rorschach test. That was a Rorschach test of blackness,
Yeah, for
and
sure.
I'm like,
For
okay, I see
sure.
the racist in the room. I see the
mhm.
part of it was generational. It was like, oh, you kids and your Elvis and your swinging hips, and part of it was like, who are these N words? Like, what is going on here? This is way too black for me. Bisa, go ahead. You were raising your hand. You're muted, by the way. What did you want to
Yeah, I
say
just
here?
wanted to just jump in real quick that one of the biggest artists, I think he's the top selling American, Black American artist, and it might be in other categories, but Jean-Michel Basquiat, he was, like you'd
Hmm.
say, an artist who had the Trojan horse. By his last name, I know a lot of people, especially in that
Hmm.
time, there was no social media, they didn't even know that Jean-Michel was black. They didn't know that he was half Haitian and half Puerto Rican, come from immigrant parents. And his artwork, people covet that. I think his big piece was over $100 million, but it's all about black culture. He made
Wow.
it his own style, but when you start looking at like those famous pieces like Hollywood Africans, he's speaking directly to black people, but people are consuming it because, like Khalil said and Ramel, just that he's cool. So I want his
Yeah.
artwork.
Hmm.
But do they really understand? And I think I do like walking that line, having the double entendre and the code switch. I want my artwork to be accessible for everybody, but in some terms, I'm speaking directly to my own people.
I got to say, look, in closing, um, I think that it is an incredible time to be black in this country in general, but to be a black artist, I think it's even more incredible. And I think there's more of an opportunity now for us to show up in our full blackness with, um, unapologetic. And because we all know we've been through this before, this too shall pass. Us old folks like me and Kamal, we've already been through this, and we know this too shall pass, and it makes us better
I'm
artists.
old too. I'm sorry.
Uh, No, I'm not going to say that about a woman.
Hey, me too, you guys. Like, I'm up there. It's just Khalil here who is like, half our age, but still carrying the torch, you
but
know?
still wiser than all four of
Yeah,
us put
right?
together, all three of us put together, four of us put together.
Yeah.
So listen, I want to thank you guys for doing this, and again, it's indeed an honor. Continue to do what you do. You make us all proud. Ramel Ross, W. Kamau Bell, Bisa Butler, and Khalil Green.
Thank
You
you so
guys are the
much.
best. I'm Don
Thank
Lemon.
you.
Thank you for watching. I hope that you get something out of this conversation, and that you take this conversation into your own home, business, or wherever it is that you hang out, even social media, online. So, again, thanks for watching, and share it, please.
Thank you, Don. Nice to meet you all.